how do we strengthen our relationship with the house of worship? How do we use this house of worship to enhance and magnify our worship and service?
What happens when a visitor arrives at the grounds? How do they receive hospitality? What's the nature of their journey as they leave maybe an initial greeting point and move their way up into the house of worship? The question for every Baha'i to ask themselves is, what part will I play in leading a legacy for the future?
Offer up my soul for the earthly noble by the footsteps of thy chosen ones.
When the temple was first built, the Australian Baha'i community was really small, only a few hundred believers, and the task must have seemed beyond them, really, for what was possible, and yet they achieved this extraordinary thing. There was a call that went out from the head of our faith to encourage people to go to countries where the Baha'i faith didn't exist at that time. It started in 1953 and concluded in 1963. And there was a massive expansion in the number of countries that had Baha'is in it during that period of time. It was a time of extraordinary projects, of extraordinary sacrifice, with people picking up and moving to another location. And really the purpose in doing that, it was a mission to go and bring a community building process, even though we used different language at the time, to help build vibrant communities in the places that they went. Communities that now have been transformed by a process that began over half a century ago.
Oh, hi, yeah, my name's Phil, and my family settled here in 1805, actually in Manly, and in about 1957 they decided to dig a ginormous hole up at Ingleside, and all of us wondered what they were doing, and some people were saying it was going to be for a swimming pool, and it looked as though it could have been. But then we found out that it was for a religious group I'd never heard of called the Baha'i. Because we'd always only ever had Catholics and Church of England down in the Warriewood Valley. And then in about 1961, we saw that was this big helicopter come over, and it was a terrible noise, and it had like a big bell on the helicopter top. I don't know what it is about that part of Ingleside, but there is a stillness, like a holiness. I can't tell you what the word is, but it does sort of hover in that spot. There's no word for it, it's just a peace. It's as though God, whoever he was, has put his hand down and said, that's our spot.
Hi, my name is Shirin. I live in Lane Cove, which is about 30 minutes or so from the Sydney Baha'i House of Worship. Really, it's always been a place for me of calm, a place where I can not only be there to pray, but also meditate and reflect. Many of these neighbourhoods or these pockets across Sydney will bring, busloads or carloads of their neighbours and their friends to the house of worship. And we know that this Baha'i house of worship is a place for all. So regardless of religious affiliation or gender or culture, it's really that place that all can come and unite. And so I think one key thing Across Sydney, where often we're seen as such a multicultural city, no matter if you're from the east or the west, we're seeing neighbourhoods actually connect to this house of worship as their own. So another example of where we've seen communities in Sydney take ownership of the house of worship has been with the youth. And not only are they connecting their friends with the Baha'i House of Worship and connecting them to the Word of God, but also helping them to experience this peace and tranquility that they may not necessarily experience in their environments at home, but also realizing that there is an opportunity to collectively be in an uplifting space when the forces of society tell us different. Often they're quite negative, or they can be really, just really dangerous to what youth experience these days. But this opportunity for the youth to come together on a Friday night has been one that has been really impactful.
Hi, I'm Dante Naha. I'm from Nigeria Blackett, and my connection to the temple, I would say it comes from my community. It's the people who's introduced me to this temple and who's bring me back countless times. I just feel this overwhelming presence every time we come through those gates, we reach Menavale. It's like I know I'm gonna see the temple soon, and then as soon as you enter the temple doors and you sit down, it's like a warming presence. It's like you're right there. The spirit just feels amazing. Our community just sparks even more when we come here. I would say when we're in our community and we're striving and we're serving, it's always a blessing to know that we get to come here and just pray. It's our nourishment.
My connection, I guess, with the temple, it feels like almost home. It's a place of where we can be comfortable, and where we can have the spirituality with everyone else and share it and bring it back to the neighborhood. Of course, obviously there's always forces that try to deter us, but what we got to remember is that standard, like I said before, like Abdul Baha says and Baha'u'llah says to us, even the Bab also says it to us, we've got to keep that high standard. If we come here to worship God, we should also take that back to the community, whether it be through service, through prayer as well, or with home visits, we keep that same energy.
When I got here to the temple, literally, it was just coming through the driveway. Coming through the driveway, it was like entering this new world, entering this new paradise. Finding myself out of nowhere. I've been lost this whole time, and it took me just to drive into a driveway of the temple, and it was like there was a rush of purpose, as if there was hands in front of me, welcoming me in, grabbing my own hands, pulling me in, saying you're home, in a way. So every thought I had in my head, every single hate, words, comments, everything that was ever said to me, or every hateful comment that was inside of me wanting to come out to everyone else, and every bad thing that I wanted to do, just gone. As if someone just turned it to dust and blew it off somewhere else. At peace, safe, somewhere where I needed to be, a place that wants me to be there. Just a friend, I felt.
My connection to the temple is lifelong and multifaceted. I came here as a youth. I spent the first night of my youth year of service in the House of Worship. I sang in the choir. And now throughout many years of service. The National Assembly says its prayers each morning of its meetings in the House of Worship. I really have to say that sort of almost every major spiritual moment of my life has had some connection to the temples. You know, anybody who lives on the northern beaches in Sydney can tell you what the Baha'i House of Worship is. The significance that that's had for the Baha'i community, not only here in Sydney but around Australia, is incalculable. It's been a place for people to come with their families on a Sunday, for friends to drive by and drop in when they wanted a moment of solace or quiet, and that's whether they're a formally enrolled member of the Baha'i community or not. It served that role for many, many years, and the property has expanded over the years. The initial land that the House of Worship was built on was relatively small. It's then expanded into the land that has the National Office on it now, and even then further again into to additional spaces that provide opportunities for gatherings and meetings, for children's festivals, for all these sorts of things. And even then expanded even further again with the purchase of 2 adjoining properties in the early 2000s, which now provide a place for institute camps or for other gatherings of the community. So what the House of Worship was in the 1960s has expanded constantly in that period of time. But it has not undergone, the central edifice itself, the House of Worship itself, has not undergone a major renovation such as we're now proposing in its entire 62 years since the dedication of the temple. So now's a big change, a significant change. But the design of all of that is to recognise that the House of Worship itself is the central ornament, the central edifice of anything else that happens, and everything else that happens on site takes its reference from that initial point. This is why the temple, its immediate surrounds, its steps, is really the first phase in the redevelopment of the National Centre, the National Temple site.
So these gardens, you know, they're getting a little tired, getting a little old, but they're still in fairly good health. And we can reuse a lot of these plants elsewhere in the grounds here. But it's the wildlife around us that keeps this garden healthy. There is a very wide diversity of insect species, for example. So we never seem to get a population explosion of pests. And it's because the natural insects and others keep them under control. So we don't have to use pesticides, or we very rarely do. These palms are a native of Australia. We'll be reusing those in the new landscape. But other things like this beautiful Japanese maple we'll transplant and use elsewhere in the grounds. We'll also be able to do that with this one and all of these hedges here. So we'll be reusing nearly all of this landscape. And then the whole garden area will be redeveloped into new gardens.
Hi, my name is Roya Shagori, and I'm here today welcoming you to the House of Worship. I serve the House of Worship as its director and also serve on the temple board. And now we're also learning that how this House of Worship needs to be connecting to the communities, surrounding communities, and the local community, and also the local council in the area, that every person that comes here, they really feel that this is their House of Worship, and they feel ownership to this edifice. When the visitors come, they stand here and they watch and read these teachings, some of the principles of the Baha'i faith, and also the quote of Baha'u'llah. And it really touches their hearts. What they read, but it talks about the unity and the power of unity that can illumine the whole earth. See, this is the safety and the concrete that needs the refurbishment, and the renovations are required. That's one of the pieces that just falls off. And you see that in different areas as well. Other challenge that we have, as I talk about, the windows that are there, they all need to be restored again so the water doesn't come in. And there's also inside of the temple that, for over 60 years, not much has happened, and really it's time for it. So, because this, we're saying, is a house of worship that belongs to humanity, it belongs to everyone, and for that it needs to stand longer so that it can serve that purpose, and it can serve as a spiritual center for the society.
In the context of Australian bushland, in an area with endangered flora and fauna. And as you move away from that immediate tranquility zone, you move into a less formal Australian bushland, very much the context of the country that the House of Worship is in. So each of these, whether you're there individually, the individual spiritual journey, or whether you're there collectively, that sort of sense of coming and going through less formality into greater formality and into the House of Worship itself is very much a part of this particular design, and why the National Assembly briefed what was required and chose this design ultimately. So while it's always a place for individuals to come and to pray, of course that's something that they've always been able to do and will continue to be able to do. There's then also the thought about, well, what spaces are needed when you're doing a design like this that might enable groups of neighbours or groups of families or groups of youth or maybe members of institutions to come together, not just to pray in the House of Worship itself, but also to experience the tranquility of the grounds. That's a very important factor in design, not just in the temple itself, the central edifice, its immediate surrounds in the tranquility zone, but also the placement of other buildings around the broader site. So this design, which is the first phase in a broader master plan for the entire site, and not just in this particular area, but in future in other parts of the site as well. So as you'll see in the design itself, in the specific, in the tranquility zone, that area immediately around the House of Worship, the design is much more formal. It's closer to the central edifice itself, but it still has gathering places where people can sit and pray collectively or meditate together collectively. The task that we're now undertaking is commensurately large. The beautification of the grounds was well beyond what was possible for the believers in that time, in the 1950s, such a small group of believers. Yet they sacrificed in an extraordinary way. Many of them took second jobs and gave all of the income from their second job to enable the temple to be built. Now, in today's community, the parallel is, what will that sacrifice be? How will the friends arise? Only Baha'is are given this privilege. The question for every Baha'i to ask themselves is, what part will I play in leaving a legacy for the future? How will I sacrifice, just like my forebears sacrificed, to enable this legacy to be there for my city, for my country, for my continent? It's really an opportunity for every believer to reflect, what can I do? What part can I play? And we feel really confident that they will play their part, they will arise, and they will leave an extraordinary legacy.